So good morning. So today I'm here with David Serville. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
So David is a CEO of the CC group of companies, which has got some iconic Kiwi brands like Crewcut, Crewcare, Chemcare, CC Training Academy, and CC Facilities Management. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what that is and what you do.
Well, largely, I guess the two larger companies that have been going for quite some time is Crewcut and Crewcare.
Yep.
One's a national lawn mowing franchise group.
Yep.
And the other is a commercial cleaning franchise group. And then we have a Chemcare is an asbestos removal company.
Okay.
And environmental cleaning does. And then we have CC Training Academy, which trains people in our industry sector and in construction-related industry sectors. So anything to do with health and safety, height, short courses usually, certificate level courses,
yep.
First aid and various things like that. And then facilities management is really just a vertical inside of what we do, which we take care of the maintenance needs of large companies.
Fantastic. So when did you first start? It was Crewcut was the first one, right? So when did that first start?
Well, that started in 1991.
Yep.
And, which, is coming up for 30 years.
30 years, yeah, that's pretty phenomenal, yeah. And how did it start?
Actually, I'd been a business owner before. I was 26, and I'd owned, my first foray into business was owning a clothing label.
Yep.
And the stock market crash came along, and I probably was in my infancy as a business owner and had a really good relationship with my bank manager. And in those days, the bank manager was all pre-stock market crash, would turn up and have lunch with you and hand you piles of money. And then the stock market crash came and my bank manager stopped taking my calls and it disappeared. And I was like, Ma, what's gone on? What's changed? And giving money was not part of the scheme of things then. And I thought, wow, I'm going to have to, this early stage, I need finance. So I wound that company down. I decided to go mow a few lawns.
Okay.
And that's how it all started. We used to build lawn rounds up and sell them. And I went off to Sydney with my then wife at the time, and for a month or two. And a friend of mine rang me and said, hey, I admire the way you do business. How about we start a business together? And he mowed some lawns as well. And he had good access to finance, and then the rest's really history. We decided to start Crewcut.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll come back to a bit more about that. But before we get started, I always like to share with our guests a personal and a professional best from you, so they can get to understand you a bit better. So if we start with professional best, what would you say your professional best is?
I think my professional best is probably 30 years in business.
Yeah.
30 years in one brand in business. So, and to have a business that is still growing and profitable 30 years on.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Well done. And personally, what's your personal best?
Look, my personal best is probably growing my family. I've got 5 kids and 4 grandchildren.
Wow.
and so I think that would be my and now 2 ex-wives.
2 ex-wives and a current wife, right?
And a current wife.
Excellent. We were talking about this before. I mean, and one of the things you said is you're actually also very good friends with all of your ex-wives, and they're an important part of your life. Is that right? Yeah.
Well, they've helped my business journey really along the way. And while my first wife I wasn't part of that. My second wife, I was with for 18 years or so, and she certainly was significant in helping me along the way of getting cracking on with business.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So tell me, what do you love about business? What is it that you enjoy about being a business owner?
control my own destiny,
Yeah.
freedom, making up my own rules,
Right.
and I love the learning that goes with it, and very much a just-in-time style of learner.
Yep.
So when I've got a problem to solve, I'll do the study
Right.
then, rather than
preparing.
than do an education course that I can't apply straight away.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So what have been the biggest learnings you've had? Because 30 years in business, there must have been a few ups and downs, I'm guessing.
Yeah, there has been a few ups and downs. And, fortunately, I started in franchising early on, largely because I actually had someone from Amway come around and sell to me.
Oh, really?
And while I didn't want to get involved with Amway at the time, the epiphany was they came into my living room, sat down and taught me about leverage. And I looked at this thing of leverage. It's business system. Oh, business system. And you get leverage, and you do that by growing processes and systems and build something significant forever. And so that was where I came up with the idea of franchising. On the way, there's been lots of learnings. One was I thought I'd be rich within 3 years.
That didn't happen?
It didn't happen. And I felt very fortunate that I could pay myself a salary that I could survive off in the first 4 years. I think it took me about, it was about 3 to 4 years before I was earning money that would pay the bills.
Right.
In terms of, which was quite long,
I think it's pretty normal. I would suggest maybe 2 to 3 years, but yeah, still, it's a long time to go without having...
Yeah, well, I had family at the time, so I probably need a little bit more money. So I had certainly one child then.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
So it wasn't an overnight success, is that what you're telling us?
It was not an overnight success, and because I was quite a good, quite okay at running long distance. Mm-hmm. And I think that's in my nature too, is to be patient.
Right.
And to go the distance. And so, I used to enjoy running. And yeah, I think there's some parallels to business. So I was very patient.
Yep.
Back then, I waited for profit. I always paid others before I paid myself. My franchisees earned more money than I did in the early days.
Yep.
And, and I was very patient to get dividends. Mm. Yeah.
So you said that, you always had in mind that it would actually become a franchise. Mm. What was the sort of the tipping point between it being sort of what you consider successful and still a baby business?
Look, I think getting that foundation built, where you had the numbers and you had cash flow coming in, significant cash flow coming in every week, and being able to then build another game on top of that. In the early days of business, you're certainly under-resourced, and to be able to hire people and pay them reasonable money,
yep.
is quite a turning point. I mean, there was always the early stages where you're scratching around and trying to induce people to come and work for nothing, and that's tricky too in an important stage.
Yep.
But to be able to pay people good money and grow those employee numbers, and to not have to do everything yourself.
Yeah. We talked about before. So in the early days, you have to do everything yourself, right?
You have to do everything yourself. And while you're not good at everything, I started, as I say, I started with a business partner who exited at about year 5. And he had some very real skills that I didn't have. When he left, it was certainly I had to be more diligent around those areas. Because he took care of the numbers. He was good with numbers.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you had complementary skills, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I was more sales.
Yeah.
we always used to laugh about it. He was a pessimist.
Yeah.
I was an optimist, being a salesperson.
Yes.
And he said, pessimists are realists, David. In other words, people who understand numbers are realists.
Yes.
And I guess I become more in favour of understanding, that is a very real message.
Yeah, but when we were talking before, you mentioned that, entrepreneurs, we're forward-looking rather than backwards-looking. So
Yes.
numbers tends to be focused on the past rather than the future.
Correct.
So whilst I agree you've absolutely got to know your numbers and know what you're measuring and why, how do you balance that sort of, the pessimist with the optimist, which is really what takes the business forward?
Yeah, well, I live in optimism and I live in vision.
Yep.
And I'm forming a future plan all the time, and it's anchored in numbers.
Right.
And I think because I've got family, which is a hugely important thing for me.
Yep.
I'm not a massive risk taker, so I'm really pinning my plans and my thoughts on numbers that make sense, and growing things maybe more conservatively than somebody that would not necessarily have to consider that legacy piece around children and grandchildren and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
And I know your family is really important to you, and you've got a 5-year-old son and a 2.5-year-old daughter, right? So how do you balance that whole work business life?
Look, I limit my hours now, and I'm often home by 3:30, 4 o'clock. I work about 6 hours, and I commit myself to taking my son skateboarding on a Tuesday, and I think through winter it was to Snow Planet to snowboard.
Yep.
And that's just, it's a priority now.
Yeah.
In the early days, I guess one of my metric is how many wives I've had, and I didn't balance it particularly well, and hence, that's the report card I've got. But it's let's hope we don't make the same mistake, and so. For me now, having a very balanced family and business is an imperative.
Yep.
And I'm very fortunate that I don't have to be compromised in that area.
So that means you actually literally have to let go as the owner, right? Let other people get on with running the business. How hard is that? Because I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, we are control freaks, right? We want to keep control of everything.
Yeah. So, one of the epiphanies that I had was being coached by somebody up in Manila one day.
Oh.
Actually, we're both been living on the edge of EO, and it was an EO coach entrepreneurs organisation.
Yep.
And he coached me about this, and he actually pointed me in the direction of a book called Multipliers, which was hugely instrumental in me changing my tack with how I manage my people. Because again, you can't grow a business without people.
Yep.
And that's another point of leverage. And so another metric would be how many key people can I put under me to grow my business. And you can't grow them by micromanaging them or giving them the answers.
Yep.
Hire good people and ask them questions. And that was one of the messages of the book is don't diminish people by giving them the answers, and grow your people by showing them respect and supporting them to use their answers.
Yep.
And if you know you're on track with that, they'll bring you ideas all the time. So they'll be in a meeting and their ideas will float to the top. And I think the hardest thing for an entrepreneur is to to not go around an office giving everyone the answers.
Yep.
And because it just doesn't grow your people. It's disrespectful
Yep.
and futile.
Fair enough. So that must mean, though, you have to have trust in the people that you've actually got working for you. So how do you choose those right people for those positions?
Well, it's not always easy. But, you know, I guess the best advice I ever got on hiring people is hire an attitude and train on skills.
Yeah.
And so I'm always, you know, I guess an amateur psychologist when I hire people.
Yeah.
And while someone might have the right talent to work within my company, they've got to fit the value system.
Yep.
And they've got to have the right attitude, which fits within our culture. And so that's really important to not hire people on skill set. You know, hire people that actually have a desire to come and work for you.
They get it. They want to come and work with you.
They want to come and work. They want to be inspired by you, and they want to come and fit into your group and join your team. You know. That sort of attitude, loyalty,
Yep.
integrity, they're really important. And so I don't always get it right.
No, you're human.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing that I hear a lot of is hire slowly, fire quickly. Yep. We don't fire people in New Zealand, but get them off the bus quickly.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
And we talked before that, you know, sometimes actually having the laws that we do have is of benefit because it stops us from making rash decisions about getting rid of people. And sometimes people have things going on in their life that they actually can't control. And so being able to work with them to work through that can be helpful.
Yeah, look, I have the ongoing discussion that we did this morning, how business owners are frustrated by the labour laws, but actually, I think there's a silver lining in the whole process of showing respect to anybody that you hire,
Yeah.
and going through an offboarding process, which doesn't always end up with offboarding. It can end up with redeployment.
Yeah.
It can end up with firing up and getting people again re-enrolled in the business. And so that whole process, the outcome is not always off the bus.
Yeah.
So I've grown to like the process, frustrated still by the timeline sometimes, but it is a good process for both parties.
Now, we decided to set this topic as, you know, don't get lost on a rabbit hole, so how to get back to clarity and focus, and that was because you were sharing with me last year was an interesting year. Entrepreneurs often get sort of, you know, distracted by bright, shiny objects and things they want to do. Tell me a little bit about your year and what happened with your rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, COVID, it was, you know, I mean, yeah, it was for business owners. I think we can all agree that it was extremely confusing when we were coming through to the end of March, and we didn't know what it would mean for us.
Yeah.
And so it was extremely confusing. I felt like I was in a cloud of confusion. I was working through a cloud of confusion into the unknown. Like it was one of those years we were all working into the unknown.
Yeah.
And I thought I would play offense rather than defense, and so I hired 10 key staff. And
10 key staff last year.
10 key staff last year, and started 2 businesses.
Yeah.
And
new offices.
New offices. We actually that was already committed to, and they delivered. We did a design job on the new office, and they delivered the furniture the night of alert level 4 to make sure they could invoice us. And we shut the door and went home for a month.
Oh no!
And I hadn't shown the office to my staff and offices to my staff, and so that was a bit deflating. But so we started new offices. It was a great year, and then, you know, in the new offices, we'd have people knocking on our door offering us to sell businesses to us and new deals, and there was partners coming in that we hadn't dealt with before, and we just had a fresh approach. But I completely got distracted by all of that.
Right.
So I brought in a very talented friend of mine, who's another EO member, actually more talented than I am, and a lot more talented than I am, and a lot more experience than I have, and that's Marissa Fong,
yep.
and to basically tell me what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong, give me some clarity.
Yeah.
And so that was very useful.
How did you recognise you're getting distracted? Because it's very easy to get kind of, as you said, down the rabbit hole and actually even forget that you're down the rabbit hole because you're so engrossed in it. So what was the trigger points or the sort of, hold on a second, something's going on here?
I think there was a feeling of fear when I knew I'd done some things right over the year.
Yep.
But I wasn't clear on all the things that I might be doing wrong. And I really wanted another talented entrepreneur to come in and just throw a glance over my business,
yep.
and tell me how I was going. Also, I was thinking about starting another business yet again, and it was in recruitment. Marissa's got a lot of experience in recruitment, and it was a recruitment and labour hire, really.
Yep.
And I got some very strong indications from Marissa to get back to the knitting and not go down that rabbit hole called starting another business. Although part of my offensive play was I did actually start 2 businesses over that year, and she was aware of that.
Yep.
So anyway, that was really useful. So as I mentioned to you before, in one of my businesses, I left a chunk of change on the table, and that was because I was really kind of distracted.
Yep. Okay. So clarity and focus. What does that look like? What does it mean for you?
Well, clarity and focus is about commitment. It's about getting committed to solving the problem.
Yep.
And to understanding what is the problem you want to solve, and then becoming laser focused around that. Yep. And I guess one of the emotions for me late last year, when I looked at one of the things I'd done wrong, was a little bit of anger, which motivates me. Okay. I got angry,
yeah.
And I got angry with myself, and that was kind of like really motivating.
Yeah.
I was going, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm going to fix that. And it was like, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And what are we doing wrong? And why did we end up in this place?
Yeah.
And it was quite useful.
Did you work through that with your key people?
Actually, I did, but it was more my personal process. I mean, there was things that we needed to change, and we started talking about it before Christmas, and then bringing in the right people, and as soon as we got back in work, and we've got some exciting things. Our new financial year is going to be incredible, I think, and I feel even though the early numbers look promising, and I feel like we're back on track. We've got a ways to go before I can really feel like we're hitting our stride.
Yep.
I'd like to see the numbers for mid-year.
So I asked you to sort of, share a little bit with us about what mistakes you've made and how you share them with other people to help avoid making the same mistakes. But you also mentioned numbers in one of your top tips that we're going to talk about. So yeah.
Look, I don't have a natural talent with numbers, and so again, one of the big breakthroughs for me was 4 years ago. Going, you know what? I need a really strong person on board around numbers. I understand the bottom line.
Yep.
I understand EBITDA. I understand
I
understand money in my bank account.
Yeah.
But I decided to get a CFO because things were starting to get a bit complicated, and that was a really good hire for me. And we've had 4 very successful years since he's been on board, and growing the companies exponentially, and I've become very reliant on his knowledge and him educating me in areas. We had a company, Chemcare, which was about hiring trade type people with a particular skill set in asbestos removal. And he taught me about labour production ratios, and I was like, that was huge for me, is understanding labour production ratios and
its effect on profitability.
And we both know somebody called Tony Falkenstein. In his book, he says, never hire someone that doesn't walk fast. He tells a story of how he would walk behind somebody at an interview to see, and if they walk slowly, they didn't get hired. And in a way, that's a great metaphor for labour production ratios and where hidden profit is. We learnt a lot through Chemcare's journey, because a lot of our profit was in poor performing staff, and them using their time inefficiently.
Interesting. Okay. So you mentioned there's a book that you also got that you found that really changed the way you viewed numbers.
Yes. It was written by another EOer, Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits by Greg Crabtree, and it demystifies for people like myself who are a bit challenged. The good numbers to work on. I think one of the things that came out of that was also understanding that once you get to a certain size, you can then start hiring really good people. And I think in that book, it was quite interesting reading it. It was like once you get past I think it was 3 to 5 million, you're really into some good growth then. You can hire some great people, and it's like that number is breaking through a glass ceiling. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was sitting at much lower numbers than that, and then shortly after, by breaking through that 3 to 5 million area, my business really took off.
Fantastic. Okay, so we'll put a link to that book on the podcast page. People can actually have a look at that. 2 other quick things for us in terms of top tips for people. We've talked about clarity and focus. What is that?
I actually think that if you're a founder, sole shareholder, and you're driving the business, whether it's in a general management role function or whether it's a CEO role function, that your company is only ever as good as the clarity that you have and the vision that you have, and for that matter, your behaviour. So the lesson for me was knowing just how unclear I was last year, and getting that clarity back felt like I got back on a winning team.
Right. Nice.
And so, you cannot point the finger at any of your staff when you haven't got clarity.
Yourself.
So, what do they say? Point one finger and 2 fingers back at yourself. and it's very much you are the fault. You are the blame. If the company is not performing up to expectation, it all sits with you. And so you've got to take a good hard look in the mirror and get really committed about that thing that you're trying to solve and what it is.
Perfect. And one last thing, last top tip for our viewers before we sign off for the day.
Look, people management, hiring great people and looking after them and having them being guided by the values and purpose of the company, and don't tolerate people that do not live the values of the company and do not bring a good game to the table. You know, hiring people is both a rich experience and can be quite frustrating because they're imponderable. You know, and you know there are times that people go off in weird tangents, and you know, and some of that, if they're not right to be sitting in that seat, then don't have them sit in that seat.
Yep.
And get them off the bus or get good people on the bus. You know, we have most of our people have stayed with us a long time. We have a good culture, but occasionally we get it wrong.
Yep.
So, you know, you can only grow a company if you've got great people and you let them get on and do their job and you've got a great vision.
Yeah. So they all come hand in hand. The clarity, the focus, the people, and knowing your numbers are the kind of the key success factors.
I think so. That's certainly for me.
Fantastic. Hey, great. Look, we're running out a little bit short of time, so we're going to wrap up there. If people want to get in contact with you, David, how do they find you?
Oh, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn,
David at CC Group or David at Crewcut, any of those. David at Chemcare, David at crewcare.co.nz, any of those will find me. In fact, you could probably just about Google me.
It's a fairly unique name, isn't it? That's fantastic. Hey, look, thank you so much for coming in. Thanks for kind of getting through. We've got a bit of a party going on outside at the moment. There's quite a bit of a distracting noise, but I appreciate you being focused and sharing with us. And there's so much more I could ask you, but I really, that has been really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Debra.